And now that we are ready, again, my name is Julie, and I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Carolyn Parsey, who has joined us today. Yeah, looks good.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Parsey. I'm joining you from home today, but I am an assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at UW Medicine, and specifically working in the Memory and Brain Wellness Center at Harborview. You get to hear about one of my favorite topics to discuss, which has to do with technology and how we can use technology to do a variety of things. I'll be talking about a handful today. I always like to make a disclaimer whenever I do a talk like this, though. I'm going to be talking a lot about different companies, different brands, different devices and things like that. I do not receive any reciprocity or royalties from any company that I'm discussing. They're really provided as examples of things that are available for consumer technology. I also like to remind folks that I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things. And so just a reminder that the slides will be available later so that you will have that information. So don't feel like you need to panic and write everything down. So what we'll be talking about today is I'm going to go through some different areas where technology can be helpful for different aspects of memory, whether that has to do with organization or navigation. I'll also spend a bit of time talking about internet security and password management. It's not the fun part of my talk, but it's really important. And then given the context of COVID-19 and what we've all been up against for the past, my goodness, 8 months, I also want to talk a little bit about opportunities of staying connected, things like Zoom, which we're using today, and other options that we have available. So I always like to start off by talking about the lowest possible, if not no tech type options that we have. So when we think about memory problems, one of the main things that comes up when I talk to patients is challenges with just remembering where I put things, where I put my keys, where are my glasses, and they're on top of my head, those sorts of things. Also concerns about remembering appointments, things that are coming up, and organization, kind of this daily organization. One of my favorite things to use for this, and I do it myself, is a kind of a small whiteboard. It can be a small kind of a chart or something like that, but it has the option of putting information on one side that's just specific to today. So what do I need to get done today? Maybe that's the short grocery list that I have. Maybe it's the appointment that I have this afternoon that I need to get to, or a call that I need to make this evening. And then on the other side of that section, whether it's, again, a whiteboard or some sort of chart, is more of the bigger picture. So thinking about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Are there birthdays I need to remember? Is there bill payments, things like that that might be coming up in a week or two that I need to have on my radar, but aren't immediately important. So that's one example. I always like to mention that keeping things in the same place. So if you know, the classic kind of dropping your keys right when you come into the door, somewhere that's convenient is good, and somewhere that you will always look for them, rather than keeping them in a different place every time. It's going to send you on a search all over your house. So then we can increase the technology load here and do other things in order to help us find some of the objects. So for example, Tile or Cube are two companies. So you'll see this on the left-hand side of your screen. These are little RFID tags that can attach to a wallet, phone, purse, basically anything. They're small, about the size of a quarter. And what you can do is you can either use your phone, you can use your computer, a tablet, anything like that, to then help locate where those objects are. And so if you realize that you've left your wallet behind, maybe, you know, at the grocery store or something like that, this can help you retrieve them or figure out where they are in kind of a pin drop. Other organizational options, I'm sure you're familiar or have least heard of some of our smart speakers, which are things like Alexa or Amazon Echo. Also, Google Home has a very similar. Sonos is another company that does this as well. So these are speakers that are connected to the internet. So you can ask them to do things. What's helpful about this is that it eliminates the need to learn a new computer program. So you don't need to learn how to input new information into a calendar system or something like that. It will do it for you. You just need to tell or say out loud the particular action that you want something to do. So whether it's add this to my grocery list or remind me to take my medications in an hour, something like that, just saying it out loud will allow the system to give you that reminder, either audio or visual if you have one that has a video component as well. There are a handful of options for phones and communication and pieces like that for those of us who still have landlines. If you have a loved one with memory loss, or you're struggling to remember phone numbers and you don't have them neatly written down, there are a couple of phones that are available that are very specific to your kind of your favorites, so to speak, and you put your top 9 based off of the keypad, your top 9 folks that you would call, and those are all pre-programmed, and so you can actually use little pictures, and so you can just go ahead and hit the picture that you want to dial, that way not having to remember the particular number or have to look it up. We also have a handful of watches. Lifeline, you've probably heard of Life Alert, is probably the most well-known. These are different devices, some more covert than others. So those watches that you see there are similar to something like Life Alert, but it looks convincingly like a watch because it does operate like a watch. And so these are connected to emergency services. What's nice about them is that they have what we call accelerometers, which are a component inside the watch that is able to detect something like a fall. It detects a rapid change in your position. And so that triggers this concern of, did something just happen? What can happen with falls, as you probably know, is that sometimes when we do fall, we hit our head. And if we hit our head, we might lose consciousness. We might not be available to make a call to help if we're by ourselves. And so what's nice is that some of these newer technologies actually have that embedded in, where if you're not responding, so in this case, in Lively is this one that's up in kind of that top piece that has the little speakers, that if you fall, it will detect that, and then it will have a speaker that comes on similar to Alexa, and it will say, are you okay? Do you need help? And then you can tell whether or not to call your daughter, to call your son, to call 911, and kind of make that call of what severity level, or if you're okay, you just took a trip and you scuffed your knee. Medication is another thing that comes up often. I can never keep up with the number of medication pill box, snazzy pill boxes that are coming out these days that are far beyond what we typically imagine of just that 1 week plastic box that's the long, that long toothpaste looking box. Now we see more things that are automated. So in this case, on the far left side, you have a 28-day. Each little section represents a day. And so if you're only having to take medications once a day, this is really nice because they're all in one little capsule. And then it will open at the right time or for the right day. So you know whether or not you've taken them for that day or not. So it's not the challenge of, oh, darn it, did I already take them or did I forget to take them? And being in that range where you don't want to take them twice because that could be problematic, but you want to make sure that you did take them. If you're someone who has to take medications multiple times per day or different intervals, something more like the MedMinder, which is the piece in the middle, can be helpful. This divides your medications into days, which represent the columns. So you see across the top, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. And then also into times 1, 2, 3, and 4. down in the rows. And so you can also program this so that it opens at the correct time, say for your 9 a.m. medications or your noon medications. And you can program those for those different timings. The other thing that's come out that I'm a big fan of are just the pharmacist pill packs that have come out. They have a variety of names of what they call them. Some look like this one over here, where it's a card, and that you punch them out the back. And those are separated, like take these at breakfast, lunch. But what's nice is that they've already sorted all those pills for you, and they come in a card. Some of the pharmacies have a corresponding app where it already is pre-programmed with the medications and the timings. So you'll get little, what we call push notifications, which are the little things that pop up on your cell phone screen, telling you, you have a new email or you have a new voicemail. It'll say something like, it's time to take your medication because it's 2 o'clock. So it can be coordinated with this card. Sometimes they come in a long strip instead. Depends on your pharmacy, but something to look into. A lot of the insurance companies are covering this now at no additional cost, compared to other just general prescriptions in bottles, which is also really nice. So worth asking your pharmacist about. A couple other things that we have for medications. If you're somebody who has to take a medication with a certain amount of time in between, so you have to let 8 hours pass or you have to let 12 hours pass before you take it again, there are these timer caps which time when you take them off of the bottle, and then it does a countdown. So if you're somebody who has to take it 10 hours later, once you take it off, put it back on, it will then do a countdown of 10 hours. So you have a notification on the top of how much time before you need to take it again. Sometimes they have a little timer, sometimes they don't. And then just other things that are more general. So we have Reminder Rosie. This is kind of similar to an Alexa type system where, but it's more personalized. So you're not hearing Alexa's voice or Siri's voice. You're hearing voice of somebody. It could be yourself, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be your best friend, giving you some of those reminders. So a very similar approach of auditory reminders, but it can be personalized. In terms of navigation, wandering off, getting lost, all those sorts of things. I was speaking earlier about tile and cube, which are to find objects. I'm going to be talking more in this piece here about finding people. So we have different objects that are similar to tile or cube where we can attach them to a key ring that most of the time will be with a person. It could be attached to just your pant. It could be clipped to like your pant loop or something like that. So the little piece on the right or on the left is what we call pocket finder. It looks like a car key fob. But what it is it is a little GPS tracker. So if you go for a long walk, but you're concerned that you might not find your way back, or somebody is worried that they might need to come find you later if for some reason you get hurt or something, this is a little key fob that can go with you, and that way they can find you via an app later. Again, it's like a GPS pin drop, so that they know where you went, and so they can find you in case you get lost. Similarly, they have done things where they've put something kind of like that key fob, so a GPS tracker in the sole of a shoe. So this gets at the common problem that if I'm forgetting to take the little GPS piece with me, it's only as good so long as it comes with me. You're less likely to leave your house without your shoes, though. So the group at Smart Sole realized this and said, okay, well, what if we put the RFID piece already just into the sole of the shoe? Then I don't have to worry that somebody needs to remember to take something with them so that they can be identified later in terms of their location. I always like to talk about kitchen safety very briefly. There are a lot of I feel that some ovens are smarter than I am these days, but There are, if you're working with kind of older appliances or things of that nature, adding a couple of extra features isn't always a bad idea. So, two main things that we often see with older adults that worry us for safety include the stove and then scalding ourselves with too hot of water. So, for the stove, there are a couple things like Cookstop or iGuard that if they're on for too long, or if somebody's not near them, or if they're not being, if the stove has been going or the oven's been on for hours and hours and hours, it will kind of beep. And then if there's no intervention, so if you don't go to turn it off or on, it will shut it off itself. So in that worry that, let's say you're cooking dinner, and then you get distracted by something, and you make dinner, but then you accidentally left the burner on and you go to bed, if there's been a couple of hours or an hour or so that's passed, that's going to automatically shut off that stove, so you don't have to worry about having a fire in the middle of the night. The other components, so thinking about temperature of water, you can always regulate the maximum water temperature on your hot water heater. So from the very beginning of this process of getting water and warming it up. But if that is still not adequate enough, then you can do specific valves for temperature control on your different faucets. What the challenge that comes up is that as we get older, our sensory is not as strong. So your sensory in your hands or your feet is not as strong as it used to be. It's not as sensitive. And so what can happen is you don't realize how hot that water really is. And so we can actually see scalding, but you didn't feel it because you've lost some of that sensory ability. So this is a way to protect that and make sure that the temperature is not going to get too high. Questions about any of those before I launch into some of the apps for phones? Okay. Great. So I will also pause here in a little bit for questions too, if you're kind of formulating them in your head, and I'll also take questions at the end as well. So I'm going to talk about phone apps in a very broad sense. I am an Android user. My husband is an iPhone user. So we have back and forth along which apps are available for different platforms. The majority of the apps, the vast majority, are available for both major platforms, the ones that I will be talking about. They might be called something slightly different, or they might have like a number after them, but generally speaking, they will be approximately the same. So I was talking earlier about medications and management of reminders, making sure that we're taking medications at the correct times. There are a handful of apps that are good for that specifically. You can always just put those reminders or the little alarms into something like your Apple Calendar, your Google Calendar, or whatever other, Outlook or whatever else you use. There are also specific apps that are helpful that include information about the particular medication as well as those reminders. So things like MediSafe, MedHelper, those are ones that they will not only provide a reminder, but they give you more context about what is it that I'm taking right now, and are there any stipulations? So like, oh, right, I'm taking Plavix, and I need to make sure that I take that with food. Or I need to make sure I get a full glass of water with, I don't know, my statin medication for my cholesterol. So that's helpful. It also has your list of medications right there on your phone anytime that you need it. So this comes up a lot in our appointments where we say, "What current medications do you have?" It's like, oh boy, and I have to kind of go back and think of them. You can pull it up on your phone and here's my current list. There are also some more organizational pieces. These get more complex, things like CareZone and Cozy that don't just look at prescription medications, but also chronic conditions, allergies, kind of a list of your major medical history. Have you had major surgeries? They kind of keep everything in one organized place. Also very helpful when you see a new doctor and they say, "Oh, when was that colon surgery?" And you say, "I have no idea. Maybe 10 years ago, but it was really 30. Time flies." That's helpful where you can actually kind of go back and look through some of those notes. So there's some of those as well that are very organized for medical history and things of that nature. This is a common issue, at least pre-COVID, when we were driving a lot more, is where the heck did I park my car? I have been in this position myself a handful of times. There are a couple of really nice apps that use GPS to help us remember or find our car. If you are somebody who has ever parked in downtown Seattle and then tried to find your vehicle after, going to a show and dinner, and then said, "Oh my gosh, all the streets look the same, and it's really dark out. Which intersection did I park in?" Something like parking or parking pin are helpful for this. So what they do is they put a pin drop of where you parked your car, and then wherever you end up, let's say you went to the theater, you went to the Paramount, and you then needed to get back to your vehicle, you can just say, "Get me back to my car," and then Google Maps it makes you a little path of how to best get back to your vehicle based off of where you parked it. There are similar things for finding your phone. So one of my favorite comments from one of my patients is like, "This is all great, Dr. Parsey, except it's all based off my phone. And what happens if I lose my phone?" It's like, excellent question, sir. So there are apps and things to find your phone. These are usually based off of a computer or a tablet. You usually have to have some other technology to find your phone. You can also ping off of somebody else's cell phone. So if you live with someone or you have a good friend, you can use that as well. If you're really stuck or strapped and don't have your own access to a computer or tablet. But we have Find My iPhone for our Apple users, Where's My Droid for people like me who use Android, as well as the Tile and Cube, which I mentioned earlier. In current times, we're obviously moving around a little bit less than we used to, but there are a handful of options for transportation. If driving your own vehicle is not a great option, or you don't have a vehicle, Uber and Lyft. What's nice about them is you can prepay rides for other people. So even if you as the rider does not have the app themselves, you can arrange for a ride, or someone else can arrange for a ride for you. What a group who made this super convenient, they call it GoGo Grandparent. And this is what this is over on the left-hand side. And what it is you're using technology that's very simple. You're just calling. It's like calling a taxi, but what they're doing is they're using Uber and Lyft to arrange that ride for you. And you don't have to worry about doing all the stuff on your phone and downloading an app and then creating an account and yada, yada, yada. Instead, what they're doing is they're arranging it for you more like a classic taxi arrangement. But it's using those platforms. So it's eliminating that interaction piece if that's a struggle for you. As somebody who rides public transit myself, two things that I really like include Move It, which is public transportation looking at when is my bus that I need. The other app for that, which I don't have listed here, is One Bus Away. That is very helpful. It's the one I use every day for King County Metro. And it includes everything from buses to the light rail and the trolley as well. Always worthy to discuss phone apps for safety. So I was talking about some of the wallet or the watches or the necklaces and things like that that have to do with safety detection, so like fall detection, or other safety concerns. There are a couple of things that you can use as apps on your phone that serve similar purposes or also for other safety issues. One is called ICE, which stands for in case of emergency. This is information, health information, so that it's kind of like a medical alert bracelet concept. So it has your basic information on it, the emergency contact of, in the event that something happens to me, call this person. Um, it can be kind of it's housed on the front part of your phone, so it's one of the highlighted pieces, so that if somebody finds your phone, then they with you, and let's say that if you're found down, they can identify some of that information based off of what's on the front of your phone. um, Fade is another one that I'll highlight here. There's a couple of different fall detection apps that exist. If you're an Apple Watch user, there is a app that's embedded in it, and this is what it looks like, is this little watch right here. It again is looking at that rapid drop from standing up to on the ground. And when it detects that drastic change, it can pop up with a little phrase like this. It says, like, it looks like you've fallen. Are you okay? And you can just click, the little button says, like, I fell, but I'm fine, right? Took a tumble, no big deal. Or no, I'm not okay, and please call someone. And that's where that SOS red button is. So there are a couple of these that are embedded, and then there are others where you would download an app that does a very, very similar process. So something like Fade. Fade is an app that does this as well, but it's on your phone. So if you have your phone on your person, it will detect a fall. Obviously, if you're not carrying your phone, it will not. So kind of the pros and cons of having something that's embedded in a watch, which you're probably going to be wearing, versus a phone where it would have to actually be on you, like in your pocket or in your purse. So this is the part where I preach a little bit about the importance of password management and information security. We are in a world right now where so much of our information is online. A lot of the things I just talked about involve your phone, involve information about your medications, about your health history, what we all call private health information. It's a good reminder to check your privacy settings on apps that you already have, on web browsers that you have. There's lots of helpful tips online. I'm a big fan of the AARP website and a lot of the things that they have done to give you little tutorials of how to go through and think through some of your current settings and make sure that they're up to date, that they are well protected for the level that you want. This also brings up the importance of strong passwords. Passwords are tough because you want them to be complicated, but you have to be able to remember them, right? And that's tough. One of the things I usually recommend is, if you're going to start using passwords that are longer or more complicated, use phrases. And because this is going to be something you can more easily remember than a whole bunch of gobbledygook letters and numbers and symbols, but it'll still be stronger than something like a single word, especially if it's a word that can be easily associated with you. As an example, my pets' names. Anybody who knows me probably knows my pets' names. They know that I am a Chicago Cubs fan. They know that have certain aspects about me that would be easy targets for things that would be quick for me to think of, and therefore easy for me to call a password. So try to avoid some of those pieces that are personal information or things that are easily guessable. Change your passwords regularly, even if it's just a matter of changing the numbers on the end. So if you have, a password and, you have a couple of numbers on the end or the beginning, change those every once in a while. And then I mentioned the AARP. They also have a nice article on how to build better passwords. So usually the next question is, okay, so you want me to now make really complicated passwords. There's no way that I'm going to remember this. How do I deal with that? Um, so I'm a big fan of password managers, password management software. I use this myself, have for about 6, 7 years. I will never go back. So what these do, these are programs that keep all of your passwords in a vault. And I want you to think of a vault, it's a more of a virtual vault, but think of it, all of these being stored behind a giant gate with one code, one lock. So what you have to do is create one master password. It should be hard. It should be something that you will be able to remember because you will need it, but it's something that should be quite difficult. And then what happens is you put in that password and it will unlock the rest of them. So if you are browsing on Google Chrome or you are on Safari and you open up your Yahoo account to jump onto your email, what it will do is it will prompt you and say, oh, I see that you're trying to log into Yahoo. And rather than you typing in your Yahoo password, you will type your master password for something like LastPass, Dashlane, one of those other programs, and it will log in for you. So it will put in your credentials, so your username and your password, and it will log you in securely. What it's also helpful for is generating secure, really complicated passwords. There's no way that you could ever remember, but you don't have to, because so long as you remember that master password, it will log you in with that really complicated password it just created for you for your Yahoo account. So there are some really nice tutorials on the different websites for this. So on LastPass is the one that you see over here. Their color is red. Dashlane is another one, as is 1Password. They're all very similar. All of them have free versions. I've been using the free version of LastPass for 7 years now. And what's great is it also reminds you every once in a while, like, you haven't refreshed that password in a long time. Do you want to do that? And then you can go and you can change it, and then it just updates in the vault, so that again, you don't have to remember it. It's already done for you. Questions about anything in this section before I jump in? I'm going to talk a little bit more about technology for fun things.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Some of the browsers have a password thing, and how do you manage that, or do you use that in addition to password or not?
Yeah, okay, perfect. I'm glad you brought this up. So yes, so things like Google Chrome has one. I use Google most often. I believe Safari has one now too, where you're right, that it essentially has an embedded password manager. Those are good. They're not as secure as something like one of the specific password managers. The reason is because the encryption is not as strong. So for example, in Chrome, if you are logged into Chrome, if you're logged into Google, let's say you left your computer out at the libraries aren't open, but let's say that a library was open, you left your computer out at the library, and somebody walked over, they would be able to log in to everything, because you're logged into Chrome. So the one extra level, so I'll say those are good. These would be better. So I usually don't use both, because it can get confusing to continually update 2 different passwords if I change them. But it's a good point. I forgot to mention that, yes, some of these are already embedded. So that's definitely a good option. This would be a more secure option. Excellent question.
Thank you.
Any other questions about especially password stuff? This is complicated stuff. Okay. I will move on. I'm going to finish out talking about technology more for leisure and fun things. So this has been some of the stuff that's come up more during 2020 of things that are available. How can I still stay engaged and active and involved in a lot of the things that I used to do 8-10 months ago? There are a lot of available online classes. I always like to highlight some of the community colleges who put on these lifelong learning, continuing education type classes. Some are free, some are for a small fee. The Seattle Parks and Rec has also been doing these lifelong recreation programs, and those have looked a little different in the past 10 months, but doing classes via Zoom or some of their yoga instructors or their physical activity classes. They've been trying out some Zoom type instructions. I heard a couple of rave reviews about one of the Zumba classes. I guess it was like a super hit and they ended up getting like 50 or 60 people linked in, which is more people than they could ever host in person. So it was even more fun to meet new people. There are also a handful of free courses in many, many subjects online. I am a big fan of Coursera, and this is an online kind of repository of university level classes in a host of different subjects. The one that you see here, an example, the Science of Well-Being, which is put on by Yale University, is one of, I believe it still is the most viewed free online class ever. And so one example, there's also things of history and art, lots of computer type classes. Many of them are free, or some, kind of for, you can do at least 10 classes for free, and then you might have to pay for those elsewhere. A couple of other options, edX and Harvard University puts on these as well. We've also seen this uptick in museum virtual tours, seeing arts from home. I was incredibly impressed with the amount of effort that many of our local groups, our arts groups, did back in March, April, May to make so much of their content available online. The Seattle Symphony was putting on recordings from shows that they did in the past. The Seattle Opera was doing the same, the Met as well. Google Arts and Culture is a really, really neat website that takes you into a lot of the major museums around the world, including ones in Paris and Amsterdam and China, Japan. So that's really neat, kind of doing some virtual traveling, so to speak. NASA put on a great virtual tour of their space shuttle museum as well, and then also looking at more of their stuff available at Cape Canaveral as well. Our libraries have also been champions in putting a lot of content online. If you haven't looked at your King County Library Service or the Bellevue Library or the Seattle Public Library System, and they're all kind of integrated under King County Library System for the most part. They are excellent. They've been doing tons of ebooks, audiobooks, digital magazines, video, movie rentals through streaming rather than having to get a hard disk. So long as you have a computer, you can watch them. Lots of really neat podcasts by the librarian. So a podcast is just a fancy word for kind of like a radio broadcast. It's just a, usually 30 to 60 minutes talking about a particular topic. They've hosted online book clubs. I'm a big reader. One of the things that I feel is underutilized in our library system is something called Your Next Five, which is an option. It's free through the Seattle Public Library. And if you send them a couple of your favorite books or books that you've recently read, genres that you love, they'll send you 5 titles. So a librarian will go through and send you 5 titles that, based off of your interests, you might like. I found some really great gems, new authors that I'd never heard of that really satisfy the genres that I like through this completely free service. There's lots of exercise and well-being type apps that we can use too. If you're somebody who wants to be tracking, your eating, how many steps you're doing, MyFitnessPal is great for that. There are a handful for breathing, relaxation strategies. Breathe to Relax is the one that you see here. It has this little bar that shows you kind of how to take in like really deep breaths and then exhale, and you kind of follow this ebb and flow. They're nice for those mindfulness and relaxation strategies. If you're somebody who's just getting into mindfulness meditation and deep breathing, it's kind of a nice, helpful tool to get you up to speed on the technique. I'll also highlight a couple of just useful apps that kind of are the potpourri. They don't fit in anywhere else. Magnifying glass with flashlight, it is just called that, is excellent. If you've ever been stuck in a dark Seattle restaurant and can't read the menu because it's dark and the print is tiny, this is excellent. It's an app that lives on your phone, and then it automatically turns on the flashlight on your phone and then magnifies content, so you can swipe it over small content and it makes it bigger, but it also has the light so that it brightens it for you. Big Buttons keyboard is what you see on the left. It makes those teeny tiny little letters bigger for your thumbs, and it can help to make sure you're not misspelling things all the time. For contrast, so it's easier to see information when it's on high contrast. So that means a light background and dark content. So kind of this like yellow with white or black on white. Silver Surf defaults your phone or your computer to have that high contrast all the time, so that you're not squinting or having to adjust. And then also some voice reading apps, so text to speech. If it's hard to read tiny font on whether it's your email or your text messaging, these are a couple where you can just click a button and then it will actually tell, or it'll read aloud the content that you have, if vision is difficult for messaging. So leave with some practical advice. So choosing kind of one thing at a time. I just gave you a slew of things that you could consider. Too many things at once can be overwhelming. So I always say choose one, work on that, then try another one and work on that, kind of build up. Use things early and often. So practice, practice, practice. It is easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you get really frustrated with something and just say, I don't want to use that anymore, give it another shot. Put it to the side for a minute, but give it another shot later. Be kind to yourself during that learning process. It is not easy to learn new technology for anyone. And so, being kind as you get used to something new. Ask friends or family for their recommendations. These are, what I talked about are not the only things that you could use. There's lots of stuff out there. This is just to get you thinking, get your feet wet, and then ultimately find what works for you. The things that work for me or your best friend or your spouse might not be the same that work for you. That's fine. Just find, pick and choose some stuff, try some things out, see what sticks and what doesn't. I'll take just a couple minutes to talk about some of the specific things that I've been hearing about from a lot of folks of how they've been staying socially connected recently. So we're doing one of these right now, which is using a lot more video call platforms. So things like Zoom, Skype, WhatsApp, Google Hangouts. Now it's Google Meet is the other one that is more Zoom-like. Obviously FaceTime, which has been around a long time for the Apple users. A couple of tips for quality video is to use some sort of stand or something. If you're using a phone, rather than having you jump all over the place all the time, and have something, a stand or somewhere to set your phone so that you're not bouncing all over the screen. Avoiding bright light behind you, because you're going to look like this gentleman on the bottom. You end up looking like a shadow, kind of a silhouette. So making sure your lighting is appropriate, or kind of turn yourself so that your lighting isn't coming from the back. trying to arrange your camera more at eye level so that it looks more like you're looking directly at the person in the screen rather than you're looking way off into the side because your camera is way over there, but your video is over here, your screen is over here. And if you're having really difficult times hearing, or if your audio on your computer is terrible, try some headphones. I use my headphones. I'm using them today. I find it a lot easier to hear on my computer when I'm using headphones instead of the speakers on my computer. Just things, some ideas. So you don't just have to talk when you're on those video calls. You can read stories, play games. You can sing. We are hearing lots of great stuff with a lot of working with grandkids and connecting with them. We had one of my patients talked about doing like a talent show with their grandkids and zooming them all in from across the country, and everybody had their 5-minute talent show piece, and everybody got to share, and it was really a fun Friday night. The Sofa Singers have become really popular over the past 8-10 months or so. That's the group you see on the bottom. It's this incredible coordinated 500-person choir that have been doing this over like remotely, and then they sync them all together. It's quite the feat, definitely worth checking out. Gratitude sharing as well. The gratitude jar is one of these where you're just expressing what you're grateful for today, and then reading about what others have been to. Other things, group activities that have been available as well, Netflix party, watch together. These are ways where you can integrate so if I am here on the West Coast and one of my family members is on the East Coast, but we want to kind of do an activity together, we can integrate and do something together. House party is kind of the goofy thing that you see up on the right-hand screen where you're doing a game of like Pictionary and drawing kind of on your screen in real time and having to guess what somebody's drawing. So there's some things like that have come out that are quite fun too. And then also just low tech and no tech options, writing letters. There have been some programs that have come up of writing letters to other people as well. Operation Gratitude is one of them. Writing poems or short stories. We had a group of family members who've been writing a story together, one line at a time, through like this email chain. So they'd start a story and then they sent it on to the next person and they added a line or two and then they sent it to the next person. They've been building this story over the past 8 months. I think they're at like page 36 or something. I'm looking forward to reading it. So kind of some creative options there too. I'll leave you with just some virtual support and social groups that are available depending on the types of things that you're needing. So my clinic is the University of Washington Memory and Brain Wellness Center, which is what UW-MBWC stands for. We have a handful of community programs you can find at that website, including our virtual coffee chats that occur weekly, our community wellness talks that also are happening weekly, and caregiver forums that happen about every 2 weeks. If you're more connected through the Alzheimer's Association, the telephone support is available. The forum, the 24-hour hotline is always available too. So there's links for you for all of those things. And I will take any lingering questions. I appreciate your attention today. It's an honor to get to chat with you this morning and hope that you found this helpful. And like I said, we will be sending out the slides so that you have some of this information and some of those links for particular technologies or options. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So again, if any of you have questions, you can type them in the chat or you can email them to myself and I can make sure that they get to Carolyn. So yeah, if we don't have any further questions, again, Carolyn, thank you so much for your time and that great information today. It's really, really helpful, even to me. I think it's really interesting stuff. So if we don't have any further questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat to make sure everyone gets answered. Yeah, so we'll make sure Daniel or myself will send out the link to the slide for the presentation so you guys can have all that information. So on behalf of the Broadview team here, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and working with us with doing things a little differently for our events and activities that we have here. So thank you again. It's lovely to see your faces. All right, thanks so much.